gonna teach you how you can improve your cardiovascular endurance, and we're gonna start right now. I can hear all the meathead gurus out there going, no one wants to do cardio. It's gonna hinder our gains. It's gonna keep us small. And then they're gonna put up the meme, we don't wanna train like distance runners, we wanna train like the sprinters. And I think that's fair to a point, but we also have to understand endurance-based training can enhance overall strength gains. Endurance-based training can improve sports performance. It can improve recovery time for all athletes. And then if we start to look at field sports like football, lacrosse, soccer, field hockey, and then intense combat sports, MMA, BJJ, wrestling, we start to see that all of those sports have extreme strength components, they have extreme explosive components, and they also happen to have endurance in them. So we need to understand how we can enhance that explosive endurance so that someone can hit big movements or big positional domination if we're talking about wrestling later on in the match, or if we're talking about football, it's the fourth quarter. How can we dominate down in the trenches? We need to have some sense of endurance. So we're gonna go over what you can do to improve your endurance as an athlete and how that'll carry over to the sporting world. So thinking through endurance through the simplest terms, okay, through physiology and what is actually happening, there's something known as mitochondrial respiration, okay? So mitochondrial respiration is when the body's gonna use some form of energy, okay? We'll take something like glycogen and the body will use that energy source to create ATP. ATP is the body's currency. It's what determines how the body can actually move. So through using oxygen and then transferring energy into ATP, now the body can start to move. And this is all from mitochondrial respiration. If this doesn't happen, we can't move anymore. So now think about as well, we know that we have to improve mitochondrial respiration, and we also can increase the volume of mitochondria so that we can actually have more mitochondria respirating. So this is a key concept to understand as we move forward through the physiology. Now we can get into how can this impact our performance with endurance. And most research around endurance-based training is going to be under sprint interval training, high intensity interval training, and then LSD, long, slow distance training. So in essence, from all three of those categories, we want substrate metabolism to trigger and enhance our overall endurance, and we want mitochondrial mass to improve our overall endurance. So by understanding the respiratory aspect, understanding the mitochondrial mass aspect, that's gonna help us. And then also understanding things like citrate, synthase, activation, and regulatory proteins from something known as P53. Now we can start to see those mechanisms, but in all reality, most of this stuff is still gonna go back to which type of training can increase our mitochondrial mass or volume, and which type of training can improve our mitochondrial respiration. So if we just look at it as simply as possible, that's going to help us make some headway into what's going to improve the type of endurance that you might need for your specific sport.
If you want to improve your cardio and you're a bigger guy like me, doing cardio and going out for runs can really beat up your joints. And that can prevent me from reaping the benefits of doing endurance-based training. That's why I love using low-impact methods for endurance-based training. That's why I recommend using the Turbo Exercise Bike from today's video sponsor, Moby Fitness. The Turbo Exercise Bike has a sleek, elegant, and aesthetic exterior that looks great in any home gym or commercial. It has a digital control dial that allows you to ramp up and down the resistance so you can decide how hard you want to push yourself. And unlike other bikes that I've often used, this bike is silent, so you can work out without feeling like you're disturbing others. It also comes with an app that you can pair with your phone or tablet. There's no subscription needed and has customizable metrics and professional classes for you to follow along with. Pick up the Turbo Exercise Bike and free access to the app by using our link in the description. Not only that, it's extremely easy to set up. It legit took us 15 minutes to put everything together. Now that you have the right tool, let's get back to improving your cardiovascular endurance.
So if we know that basically it comes down to mitochondrial mass and respiration, and then it comes down to these three types of training: sprint interval training, high intensity interval training, and long slow distance, what improves what. And initially, we know that high intensity interval training and long slow distance can contribute to increasing that mitochondrial mass, the volume of mitochondria, right? So that's a pretty clear understanding that we have. And we know that if we are trying to build a big base, if we're a CrossFitter and we're trying to enhance our base and create this bigger engine, typically we should be starting with that long slow distance. Think about someone like Matt Frazier, who was on the rower every single day for a year plus. He was improving the mitochondrial volume in his body. And then on the other side, sprint interval training, along with a little bit of high intensity interval training, has been shown to improve the respiration rate of our mitochondria. So if mitochondria is respirating a little bit more effectively, they can turn over ATP at a higher pace, and then the mitochondria is respirating at a more efficient rate. Now we have more energy and we can sustain our movement pattern at a higher intensity for a longer period of time. So this takes us into our application. Okay, we understand now that there's sprint interval training, there's high intensity interval training, which will be over a longer period of time, typically with a little bit shorter rest periods, and then there's long slow distance. Long slow distance could be 30 to 60 minutes on a rower, on a bike, doing a jog, whatever. What we can do first is test our athletes. So test yourself. Can you sustain 5 to 10 minutes of a steady state? Are you able to do that, or do you die off really quickly? And vice versa too. If we get into this and we go out and let's say we run hills, and we can run 2 or 3 hills at 90% intensity, and then by the 4th hill, we're running at 50% intensity, well, clearly we're not able to have positive respiration at a higher intensity over a longer period of time. So now we can take that and say, all right, if this person in our hill scenario is a wrestler or a football player, they're probably gonna die off in the 3rd period. If they're a football player, they're probably gonna die off in the 2nd quarter or the 3rd quarter, not even make it to the 4th quarter. So now we can start to see where that application is gonna come into play. And this is also where we can start to bring in, 2 to 3 days a week. Let's just do long, slow distance work. We've got a whole bunch of football players, a whole bunch of field hockey players. Let's spend, 12 to 15 weeks out from training camp. Let's spend that time 2 times a week, 30 to 60 minutes, just on the bike, just on the rower, maybe doing something cyclical, even getting into the swimming pool. Let's just build that mass, build that volume, and it's gonna improve their overall recovery from their strength training work as well. And while we're doing that, we can start to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We can start to talk about strategy while they're doing long, slow distance training. And then over time, we can start to bring in high intensity interval training. And then slowly, as the athlete develops and as their work capacity increases, we can start to play around with doing sprint-based interval training at certain times of the week, and also doing long, slow distance training at certain times of the week, and start to figure out how does that impact the specific sport, how does it improve their overall respiratory capacity, and how does that impact the performance that we're trying to see from the individual athlete. So 1 to 2 times a week throughout the summer, we can get on the assault bike, we can get on a rower. Hey, 30 to 60 minutes, we're gonna test you on our plays, we're gonna test you on strategy. You have to do this while we're doing that long, slow distance. And then one day we might do 5-minute repeats. So it's a little bit more of a high intensity interval training. Or we're gonna do 10 to 15 second bursts followed by 60 to 90 second rest periods. So that's gonna be more sprint interval training. And that's where we're gonna see their overall respiratory capacity increase. So now they can start to sustain that work over a longer period of time. Ideally, we would get to the point where these athletes, these football players, would get to the season and they could do 5 to 10 sprint interval-based training bouts with minimal diminishment in their overall quality of work. So that's when we're timing what they're doing. We're timing how long they have to cover a distance. And then we can take that and try and impact the play of the game. Maybe we're running a spread offense that's a no huddle offense, because we know that conditioning is king and we can wear down the opposing team's defense. This is where all this stuff can come into play, especially if we're focusing on how the endurance aspect is going to transfer over to the sport. So we know how this can transfer over to the sport. We know that endurance can improve recovery. We know that endurance-based training can actually enhance sprint interval training, so that can actually improve our explosive endurance later on in different types of bouts. If we're wrestling, if we're swimming, if we're playing football, whatever it is that we might be doing where we need explosive-based endurance. We also understand now the difference between mitochondrial mass and mitochondrial respiration, and what type of training impacts what aspect of that mitochondrial function and how it can create ATP. And then we started to break down, all right, how does this transfer over to the sport? When do we use long, slow distance? When do we use sprint interval-based training? When do we bridge the two with some high intensity interval training? And then that's gonna lead to better performance on the field and a positive impact on our overall strategy as coaches. And one of the things that I like to do is actually use this style of training inside of my Ghost Face program. So if you're an athlete, you wanna get stronger, you wanna get a little bit bigger, but still have a high level of endurance-based training, we do long, slow distance, we do interval-based training. You can click on the link down below, head over to garagestrength.com. You can pick up the Ghost Face program today to get on those endurance gains while maintaining that absolute strength. Remember, freaks, if you want to become a champion, you always have to cultivate your power. Peace.